Hello, everyone. Welcome to the pre-show. If you're watching live, we'll be getting started in about 10 minutes. If you're watching on the replay, we'll still be getting started in 10 minutes, but you can jump forward 10 minutes if you would like to. I think we got everything we need here. You just missed the podcast intros are recorded. We have recordings going down here. See the Cylons down to the bottom right. We've got recording here. We're streaming. The folks at YouTube say we're streaming. We should probably look at that. I'm sure a number of you will show up shortly. If you are here live, Wednesday at noon Eastern time, then you may be able to join us on the live chat, which is at professormesser.com/live. I do not have a live chat over on the YouTube side because it's much easier for me to look at one chat room. And it's all about me at this point, apparently. It's just simpler to manage. Put this under here. Trying to get a lot of these wires out of the way. There's more wires when I'm live streaming than when I am not. Normally don't have these headphones in. Normally it's speakers. Can't really see the speakers in this shot. There's speakers up to the left and right. Only when I'm recording a course or I am doing something live do I have the monitors in my ears wrapping around the back there. Let's do a quick camera check. That'd be good. Hello, camera. Camera 1, camera 2. Bird cam. Camera 3. Let's put something up so we can at least see camera 3 and camera 4. Camera 3 and camera 4. See, it all works. Fantastic. Hello, chat room. Hello, Houston. Hello, Chicago. May not have the number of people visiting in from the Carolinas that we're used to, according to the National Hurricane Center. As we sit here live on a Wednesday, this doesn't look all that great, quite honestly. Oh, we see it's a major hurricane. Hits right now somewhere in the Carolinas as a major hurricane. Spends a day off the coast. When was this updated? This was updated 11, so not even an hour ago. Spends a day on the coast. This is a few days out, so this could change, but does not move a lot from Thursday evening, Friday morning, Saturday morning. Is just sitting there at hurricane strength speed, just wiping away this little part. If you're anywhere in this area, you should be gone by now. So they're not going to be on the stream today. They're not going to be joining us. I hope not. Be safe. Being here in Florida, we're down here, Tallahassee area, so we're in pretty good shape. We could get some rain. This is actually, some of the models show this dipping down into Georgia, coming across Georgia and coming back up. So I could get some rain from this, but it's not going to be anything close to hurricane strength winds. Tropical depression type winds is what we'll see. So no, not really expecting any damage here, but boy, I'm really thinking about you folks in the Carolinas. Spent a lot of time in the Carolinas back when I had a day job to do. That was part of my territory. So plenty of time in Charlotte and Columbia, Greenville, Spartanburg, and in some cases along the coastlines there. Charleston really, really does not look good. That's going to be a mess for a while. Hello, Kansas. Welcome. Mission, Kansas. Not a lot of hurricanes coming through Kansas. At some point, we thought some of this hurricane was going to hit Chicago. It may swoop back up. It'll be just a storm at that point. But you may get some of that up in that area. Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? You never know with these hurricanes. And living in Florida, having gone through a number of these, it's not something you want to mess around with. Having gone through Andrew, myself, not something I'd like to do again. Not great. Welcome, Oregon, or Oregon, or Oregon, or Oregon. Nobody calls it Oregon. How are we doing on time? We're doing pretty good. If you're here joining us on the live stream, all the emails and everything else goes out in about 20 seconds. So the email notifications, the notification to Facebook, the tweet, the Google Plus, which apparently is still around, is there. So we'll be sending those things out automatically in a matter of seconds. DC is here. Welcome, DC, which is great. What else we got going? We're ready. I got questions. I got new stuff. Yes, there's some new things. I've got old stuff. Yes, there's old things. So there you go. Some more people from DC. The District of Columbia is well represented in the chat room today. We've got, well, I'll go through all those at the beginning. We'll talk about all those little pieces. Wonder if I haven't heard anything else on the, I've got a few other things working. Next month, I'll have even more things to tell you about. Just minor things here and there. Nothing too exciting to have that there. Northeast Ohio. Oh mio, oh mio. There is, what's going on? We've got new questions on the site. We've got this live stream, and there's more things we're working on. So we're never really done. There's always something going on whenever we do this. We're about 4 minutes from getting started. 4 minutes. Let's make sure folks are here. Be good if I checked my analytics to see. And indeed, folks are here. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. We got lots of Q&A coming in. Cape Town is here. Northern Virginia. We got a little bit going on. We got a lot going on. Make sure this is here. Let's go to my shows. We get the call-in lines getting ready to go. That's probably going to time out just a moment. Yeah, your Network Plus in 3 weeks. Well, one of the things is that you don't have to worry about which version you're going to take. Now it is pretty clear what version you're going to be taking. It's not like there was a significant change between the two. What is it? 30% difference in topics and exam objectives. 30% of the exam objectives are new on the 007 that were not there on the 006. So that's what I mean by that. But most of them are pretty similar to the existing topics that are there. There aren't a lot of new things. Networking doesn't have these dramatic changes in 3 years with technologies. Networking is more of an incremental update to existing technologies and adding some new things in here and there. It's not a wholesale move from one version of an operating system to another. You just don't see that. Instead, you see more incremental changes. And I think I did a course for the 004, the 5, the 6, the 7. So this is my 4th Network Plus course, something like that, 3rd or 4th. It's hard to remember. But there have never been enormous wholesale differences with Network Plus. So you're in good shape. If you studied for the 006, you can slide right into the 007. And if you start with the 007, you didn't miss anything. It's almost the same thing. 2 minutes. 2 minutes, Mr. Sinatra. We'll be getting started. Getting things going. Well, you already passed Security Plus, so Network Plus will be adding on to that, layered on top. So that'll work. We've got some good questions today, too, I think. Sure, probably check through those. Made sure they're working before we got started. Too late now. We're just going to see what happens. That's the way it goes here. We just, by the seat of our pants. Let's see what we got going on. If you are watching this on the YouTube side, the live chat is over at professormesser.com/live. And you can follow along there because there's no chat on the YouTube side. Those are the people I'm talking to. So if you're watching on YouTube wondering, who's he talking? What's going on? That's what's going on. Go to professormesser.com/live. There's a live event chat right on the page. You can pop it out, put it in another window. All of those things work as well. We're about ready to get started. Got less than a minute. I should probably prep some things on my side. Click that. Get the other thing going. This is ready. We'll click that. Look at that. It all works for once. Usually works. Usually, it most oftentimes does work. It's when it doesn't work, it's notable, isn't it? You remember those. You get the feeling when it works that it's magic every time. No Linux Plus content or study groups, at least not at the moment. CompTIA will be releasing a new Linux Plus exam very shortly. I'm going to look at that and see if it's something worth doing. I've generally not gotten back into the Linux side. I tried doing some Linux, and it just was not a good fit. It was a great fit for me. It wasn't a great fit for other people. That's a whole nother story, but it's a story for another time because it's time to get started. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the September 2018 Network Plus Study Group from your friends here at Messer Studios. I'm your host, James Messer, for this 1 hour of interactive Q&A if you're here watching this live. If you're not watching this live, then this won't be quite as interactive as you might hope, but you'll still be able to follow along. So stick around. We'll be, for the next hour, answering questions from the Network Plus exam and seeing how well you know this content. Maybe you are going to score better than you even think you might be. We do one of these study groups every month. If you're wondering when the next study group is going to be, you can check in at professormesser.com/calendar. We have study groups for A+, for Network Plus, for Security Plus. Here in the next few months, I might even be splitting up A+. So we might even have 4 of these every month. People like them so much, or they're telling me that, and maybe you don't like them at all, and now I'm stuck doing more of them. So that's the way it works. You'll also find at professormesser.com links to the interactive Q&A. I'll be telling you in a moment how to get to all of those things so you won't be able to miss a thing. Don't forget, we have every week, I've got a Network Plus question of the week you can find over on Twitter at professormesser.com/Twitter. You can follow me there. Also, all of my Network Plus videos, every single minute of every single video I create for the entire Network Plus course is available for you to watch online absolutely free. There are no limitations. There's no registration. There's no paywall. There's no thing that you have to do. They are simply available for you to watch and enjoy. So hopefully you've been able to take advantage of those things as well. A number of you like to have offline versions of this. So I have a digital and a physical version of this you can also purchase. So you can take all those videos. I can take MP3 files of every single one of those videos. This comes with my course notes. And if you get the physical version, I send it all to you at this nice little flash drive. You can plug it in and everything is there. It's at professormesser.com/getnetplus. Here's something new. Well, it's sort of old, but it's new again. So I have on my website Q&A for A+. And now that the Network Plus has been changed, it's now the N10007. Now you'll notice all the N10006 questions are gone. So now we're starting to add the 007 questions. These are archives directly from the study groups. That's why it takes a little bit of time to get a list of these available for you to go through. But if you missed some of those earlier study groups, you can go to professormesser.com/popquiz. And there's 20 Network Plus questions waiting for you right there that come directly from our previous study groups. That may be a good place to test your knowledge. If you are not interested in watching the study group, you're done with this, you want more Q&A, that's a great place to go, to professormesser.com/popquiz. There is also an audio version of this study group available for download or for live listening at professormesser.com/podcast. If you go to professormesser.com/podcast or podcasts, it'll take you to the same place where you can, of course, listen live or listen afterwards, not necessarily live, but you can listen online. And you also have the ability here to add it to your existing podcast catching program. That way it doesn't matter when a new one is added. It will automatically get downloaded and made available for you. You can find that professormesser.com/podcast. Let's talk about Network Plus. So Network Plus, we've got the N10007. And somebody's telling me my questions are not quite there yet. So by the time this thing is over, I'll be able to update that page. You'll get those pop quiz questions. So now, hours later, this will magically be working. Our latest version of the Network Plus exam is the N10007. So you'll notice last month at this time, the 006 was finishing up. Now the 006 has been retired. So if any of your study materials say that this is for the N10006 exam, I would not recommend you use those. I would recommend you get study materials that specifically state that they are for the N10007 exam. This is an exam that has been out since March, so it's been out for about 6 months. So there's plenty of content out there. It's the same structure and format as the 006, 90 minutes long. You'll get a maximum of 90 questions. They're mostly multiple choice. And a number of the questions that you get at the very beginning of the exam are what they call performance-based questions. We'll talk about performance-based questions in just a moment, but you need to be prepared for anything. Make sure you get the list of objectives. If nothing else today, this is the major thing that you should get. Go to professormesser.com/objectives and download those exam objectives. They will tell you everything you need to know to pass this exam. Everything. They are comprehensive. Make sure you get them. Today, we're going to do some online Q&A, though. I'll ask you a question. You'll go to this web page. You'll be able to answer the question, and then you'll be able to see how you did. So one way to do this would be to go to professormesser.com/QA, and that will take you directly to the page. Can't miss it when you go there. If you have downloaded the Socrative student app, Socrative is the service that we use for this. There is a student app that you can download from your favorite app store, Google Play, wherever it is you'd like to go, and you can download that app. And if you do, it will ask you for a room name, and the room name you want to put in is Professor Messer, all one word, PROFESSORMESSER. Make sure you spell it right, or you'll be in a room with no questions and nothing else going on. If you did all of these things the right way, there will be a question waiting for you in that chat, in that room. You'll find it right here. It's a question from last month. So this is our test question to make sure that you can see the questions that are waiting for you on Socrative. The question is, which of the following would be a common result from a port scan? And you'll see them. There's a multiple choice answers. They're waiting for you. Is it a list of available services running on a device? Is it B, a summary of outdated drivers? Is it C, a list of installed security patches? Is it D, uptime and availability metrics for a group of devices? Or is it E, a list of unsuccessful login attempts? So you can go through these and interactively online right now as we are here live. You'll be able to click one of those. Again, if you're watching this on the replay, you'll go to this room and nothing's going on. There's no questions. There's nothing happening. Sorry. You have to be here live to participate in this, but I can see as you are answering what these answers might be. And you can see a number of you, 55 of you have already answered a list of available services running on a device. That's 81% of you say that it's A, although 11% of you, double digits, say that it's D, uptime and availability metrics for a group of devices. And then we have single digits for the other answers that are here. So it looks like most of you are able to get in. You're able to answer the questions. You're able to see what's going on. That's great. We're able to see all of those things. We're able to see this from a port scan because that's what a port scan does. It finds the ports that are available. And with port scans like Nmap, it can not only identify the open ports, it can query those open ports and determine the exact services that are running on that port, even down to the version of the service that is running on that port. Nmap also has a number of additional scripts and flexibility that you can add to it. You can do amazing things with Nmap. It is a bit of a curve to really get familiar with Nmap, but it's very simple to get started. Nmap and an IP address will get you started, and then there are literally hundreds of configuration options from there that you can do. Very, very flexible. You can make this very fast, very streamlined. It is really a remarkable utility. So if you are one of the folks that did answer A list of available services running a device, those 83% of you got that one absolutely right. See how easy that is? We'll ask a question. You can answer the question. You're in good shape. Now, one of the things that I like to do at the beginning of these study groups is ask you a question that is not multiple choice. This is what CompTIA calls a performance-based question, which is effectively any question of any kind except multiple choice. So it can be fill in the blank, it can be drag and drop, you could be putting things in a particular order, it could be matching, it could be putting you at a command prompt and asking you to perform a particular function. You're never quite sure what it might be. And in this particular case, I've got one for you that on Socrative is going to be a fill in the blank, but it's effectively a matching question for what we're doing. And this matching question deals with port numbers. I have a list of port numbers and I have a list of descriptions. I only have 4 port numbers here, but I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 descriptions. So we're not going to be able to do a one-to-one match. There will be 3 descriptions here that don't fit anywhere. Although for bonus, if you happen to know the port number associated with those last 3, we could do that. So if you think these are in the right order now, it would be 1A, 2B, 3C, and 4D, and you'd be done. But it's not. For those of you listening on the podcast, let's go through these different port numbers. The 4 port numbers are UDP 67, TCP 389, UDP 123, and TCP 22. And I have 5, 6, 7 different descriptions. So the first description A is synchronize a system clock. B is transfer email between servers. C is gather router statistics. D is log in to a Linux server. E is automatically obtain an IP address. F is print from a Windows workstation, and G is authenticate to a centralized database. Now, if you're really good with your port numbers, as I'm reading off those descriptions, you should already be telling me what the port number is for that particular service, ideally. You'll notice that the way this is being asked, I'm not asking you for the protocol that's being used over that. A number of us just automatically remember what the protocol is for a particular port number. The exam's probably not going to ask you that either. The exam is not very big on simply asking definition questions. So that's what you want to do. So let me make it so that you can now add your answers into this live update. So if you go to professormesser.com/QA, you'll be able to add your answers into that particular page. These are fill in the blank. So this one, you really do have to know not only what the port number is, you have to know what service is associated with that port number and then what that service does. This is a very common question to see, this style of question where you don't get a simple definition. It's more of a secondary process. You have to go through these multi-step questions, a different order of difficulty associated with that. So hopefully you know your port numbers. Hopefully you're familiar with the ports themselves and the protocols, and then hopefully you know what that protocol does. This is especially important on the networking side because we see these protocols being used all the time over your network. And if you're setting up an access control list, a firewall, or some other security device, this is day in and day out. This is your bread and butter constantly. So that's one where you really have to work through all of those. So hopefully it's one you've been working with as well. Maybe you've done some work with some of these protocols, some of these port numbers, and they seem very familiar to you. We have a number of answers have come in. I'm not showing you the answers on the screen because, well, quite honestly, you're too busy Googling right now to figure that part out. You should not be Googling. I can tell when you're Googling because I know how fast the answers are supposed to come in. They're not coming in very quickly. So I know many of you are thinking this one over and trying to figure them out. There's only 4 we have to know here. There will be 3 descriptions that don't match. So don't think you have to match all of them. You just have to match 4 of them. So, and it's not, as I mentioned, 1A, 2B, 3C, 4D. One of these days I'm going to do one like that, and we'll see how you did to be able to do that. Whenever I start going through these types of questions, though, it does make me have a better understanding of what I'm expected to know going into one of these exams. So I think this is a really good question that should at least give you a barometer on, am I ready for a port-based question on the exam or not? Because this is the type of knowledge you will need to know. Now we've got a few questions, few answers that have come in, so let's go to the next page. A number of you have just opted out. You've decided, let's go to the next one. Let's figure this out, and then we'll pick up on the next multiple choice. Thank you very much. So let's go through each one of those. We'll start with number 1, UDP 67. So UDP 67, you should notice UDP 67 immediately is UDP. So we know it's what they call a, quote, unreliable protocol, which doesn't refer to the way it is received on the other end, only that it's something we can't confirm was received. And whenever we're using UDP 67, then we're talking about part of the DHCP process. There's also another UDP protocol 68 that's used during DHCP. DHCP, of course, is the Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, and it's most commonly used to automatically obtain an IP address when you first connect to the network. So if you answered 1, UDP 67, and matched it to E, automatically obtain an IP address, you got that one right. Let's do another one. Number 2 on our list is TCP 389. TCP 389. If you've ever worked with a firewall that needed to authenticate, or you've worked with a VPN concentrator that also needed to authenticate people's usernames and passwords, you may be familiar with LDAP, the Lightweight Directory Access Protocol, which uses TCP 389. And one of the most common uses of this on our network is to authenticate, especially to a centralized database. For example, when we look at Microsoft Active Directory uses LDAP as a way to access with this. So LDAP using TCP 389 would match to G, authenticate to a centralized database. Let's do number 3. Number 3 was UDP 123. See if we can show that on the screen. There we go. UDP 123. I like this port and protocol. It's easy to remember, and it's 123. Something as easy as that we think we'd be able to use. That is the network time protocol, NTP. And whenever you see UDP 123, we're trying to synchronize a clock on somebody's device, on a router, and a switch, on a workstation, on any device. NTP, very common to be able to use. In fact, we use it extensively on our networks because we have to make sure all of our devices are at least close to the same timestamp. And if you're working in networking, you're working with security, there's logs involved. It helps if you're close a millisecond between each other. So not only do we use NTP when we start up these devices, we're constantly checking in to make sure that these devices continue to be synchronized. And the last one on our list, TCP 25. TCP 25 is something we would commonly use for email, the simple mail transport. And this protocol is one that's commonly used whenever we are sending mail out to someone else, and also very commonly used between mail servers, the SMTP. This mail transfer protocol, remarkably common to be able to use that, have it there as well. We also have other protocols here to be able to have this here. Make sure you look at those and say UDP 161. UDP 161, commonly SNMP. SNMP is used for getting router statistics back and forth between others. That may be a good one to work with here, to have that there. Hopefully, whenever you start working through all of those and trying to figure out, how do I gather? How do I manage all these routers? How do I work through all these routers? How do I use all these devices? A great way to do that is to use SNMP. So make sure you're familiar with SNMP and the way that it works as well. Here's our TCP/22 for folks in the chat room saying, where's the TCP/22? Where did it go? It's here. Don't worry. Everyone's very concerned. But you're not concerned because you know that TCP/22 is SSH. And SSH matches to D, log into a Linux server. So that was a great place to go if you're ever working with devices that need that encrypted communication to a terminal session, to a command line. That's the way you do it, is TCP/22 logging in with SSH. And lastly, we have TCP/445. TCP/445 is one that you'll commonly see in a Windows environment with server message block, SMB. And server message block we can use with F, print from a Windows workstation. Anything dealing with Windows communication, that's going to use Microsoft's server message block to be able to do that. Transferring files, connecting to a Windows share, and printing using Windows. So that'd be one to use as well. Hopefully that's whenever you start going through the details of what do we do? How does this work? Where do we go with these protocols? This is just a sample of the things you need to know. Make sure if you're planning to get into understanding more about what am I going to do with protocols, that you're doing more than just TCP/22 as SSH. That won't help you on the exam. You not only need to know what these protocols are, you need to understand what these protocols do. So that's the important part to think about. Make sure you know these and all of them. One nice thing is the exam objectives will list out every single port and every single protocol you need to know. Make sure you know them. Some of you have come to me with pages of hundreds of protocols and wondering, what do we do? Well, don't worry about all of those what do we do's. With hundreds, there's a limited number. There's a finite list you need to know. So make sure when you go to look to study for the exam that you're not studying hundreds of port numbers. You don't need to know that. You only need to know the ones that are on the exam objectives. Well, I think we did pretty good. Looking through the list of what people were doing on this particular question, I think a number of you did pretty good with this one. Hopefully, a lot of you are going to dive back in for the next question where we go back to multiple choice. So some of you may be a little more familiar with that. Let's do the next one with multiple choice. I'll get things started on this side so we can do it. Here is the next question. And this is one that says, the head of accounting has received an email from the CEO requesting an urgent wire transfer to one of your vendors. After additional research, it was determined the CEO did not send this message. Which of the following would be the best description of this event? Would it be A, denial of service? Would it be B, an insider threat? Would it be C, ransomware? Would it be D, spear phishing? Or would it be E, man in the middle? So those are your options to be able to list through these and understand. Now, obviously, this is more of a security question, and this is a type of question, a type of issue, scenario that is still happening every day today. This is ripped from the headlines with this particular question. We'll go through it again. The head of accounting has received an email from the CEO requesting an urgent wire transfer to one of your vendors. After additional research, it was determined that the CEO did not send this message. Which of the following would be the best description of this event? If you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and you can answer the question right there if you're here watching live. If not, just hang out, pick your answer from the list of 5 that's there, and you'll be able to know if you got the answer right in just a moment. Don't answer in the chat room. No hints in the chat room, please. We're going to pretend we're taking the test ourselves, stepping through all the possible answers that are here, and picking the one that we would like to use. And you don't have to go to another page. Once you're on this professormesser.com/QA, just stay on that page, and you won't have to do anything else with this. This is one, hopefully a number of you have been working with these security issues and what they're associated with. There are a number of challenges with just being able to identify what type of issue this happens to be. And if we look at the list of people who have answered this question, you can see that 83% of you said D, spear phishing, as the correct answer. But is it really? Is this another one where we may have been fooled to choose the wrong answer? Because 10% of you said man in the middle, 3% of you said insider threat, 2% of you said denial of service, and 2% of you said ransomware. So this is a case where when you start stepping through all of the different options that are available, in this particular case, the only one that could really be the answer is indeed spear phishing. This is one that you will see brought up quite a bit. This is where the bad guys are going after a very specific person in the organization. In this case, they are going after someone in accounting. So this is where they've gone to LinkedIn. They found out who one of the people in accounting happens to be. It may not even be the main accounting manager. They're just trying to find anybody in accounting. And they happen to find the right person, a person who handles wire transfers. And this email that has been sent to them is one where they are now having to send money out of their account. Now, some people say, wouldn't this be whaling? Well, they didn't send the message to the CEO. They sent a message to someone who is a relatively low-level person in accounting. This is not somebody you think about. They're not on the board of directors. They're not a CEO. They're not a case where it's someone who would be an enormous, although if they had under their purview hundreds of millions of dollars that they could wire transfer, you could probably make an argument that there is a bit of a whale associated with that. But whaling wasn't one of the options available. So this is very common. You'll see on the exam is that you have to choose which of the following would be the best description of this event. That's a very specifically worded question, and one that you will very commonly see on the exam is, of the following, of these 5 options, you've got these to choose from. Which of these 5 would be the best description? Now, if I got rid of spear phishing, what would it be? Probably wouldn't be any of these. Sometimes there might be another one on the list that it could be. And so you have to choose between 2 or 3 or more different options that could technically fit, but would not be the best fit. So very common to have something like that. Focus on what you're doing. This is something, as I mentioned, is a common issue. We run into these types of problems, and spear phishing is one that is getting people all the time transferring files. It's been happening for years, and it continues to happen because people are not paying attention to the email messages. They're seeing messages come through. We just had one last week. Which one was it? It was British Airways. Was just last week, more actually this week in the news. They're going through, how did this happen? That someone was able to get this information from British Airways. And turns out somebody got the domain BAWYS.com or something like that, which looks like it could be British Airways, but obviously was not. And they use these domains to be able to phish these folks, and in this particular case, get actual money from them. You don't want to be in that situation either. And it's unfortunate when these types of things happen. Somebody in the chat room mentioned Companies do audits of these things all the time. Well, they'll have a third party send a message in, see how many people click on it, see how many people end up putting in their username and password, see how many people try to send a wire transfer to someone else. It's remarkable how good these bad guys have become. The attackers know exactly what to do and how to do it these days, so don't fall victim to any of those. Although this is the Network Plus exam, there's an entire section on security. So make sure that you're familiar with all of these different types of attacks, what they look like, what the feel of these attacks are. For most of these attacks, I try to put an example of something that happened in the real world, an actual attack against a company, so you can get a feel for how those work. You can always check those videos for more information. Let's do another question. I have one for you. And this one has got Linux in the name, so that's going to be interesting, isn't it? Here's the question. Which of these would be the best way to obtain IP address configuration details on a Linux server? Which of these would be the best way to obtain IP address configuration details on a Linux server? Is it A, ifconfig? Is it B, ARP? Is it C, ipconfig? Is it D, netstat? Or is it E, IP tables? So hopefully you know your Linux. And if you do, go to professormesser.com/QA and you can answer the question straight away. Please don't put the answer in the chat room or a hint in the chat room. We don't want any of that. So one of those would be the best way to obtain IP address configuration details on a Linux server. Is it A, ifconfig, B, ARP, C, ipconfig, D, netstat, or E, IP tables? It's got to be one of those, right? And it is one of those, trust me. Linux is one of those you need to be familiar with. Not only is it on the exam, it's on the Network Plus exam. There's a good chunk of it on the security exam. Now there's plenty of it on the A Plus exam. Plenty of Linux you need to know. And once you're familiar with Linux, especially Linux at the command line, you're familiar with Linux and you're familiar with Windows, that opens a lot of doors. That gives you a lot of flexibility. And most of the time these days, most companies are running both of those. So the better you are at understanding those. Now, of course, as I constantly mention, it would be great if Linux actually worked. I only say that to irritate people who are listening, who really like Linux, because if you are on professormesser.com right now, you're running on Linux. I love Linux. I've got multiple Linux servers handling the website. I've got Linux database servers. There is Linux on the back end for some of the caching that I do. And plenty of Linux for the load balancers and reverse proxies. There's tons of Linux. So I constantly will talk badly, if only just to troll. But trust me, I run everything. I run Windows, I run Mac OS, I run Linux, because each one of those has advantages and disadvantages, and you should be familiar with those as well. Let's see how we did with this one. 85% of you said ifconfig. Is that really ifconfig or is it ipconfig? I always get those mixed up. We've also got really just a tie for second, a four-way tie for second between B, ARP, C, ipconfig, D, netstat, and E, IP tables. This may be a little bit of a challenge if you ever get into figuring out where these things happen to be and figuring out. And as people are mentioning in the chat room, some of these commands are quickly becoming deprecated in new versions of Linux. You may not even find that ifconfig is there any longer. But most of the current versions of Linux will still support this, so you're still okay if you want to be able to use that. Ifconfig is available on and listed in your exam objectives. Make sure you're familiar with those. You don't want to mix these up with the ipconfig and the ifconfig. They do similar things, but we're talking about two different operating systems. The ipconfig obviously is the Windows IP configuration, and ifconfig is the one used for Linux. So make sure you get those correct. And eventually, as I mentioned, those are going away. So we're going to have to find even new commands other than ifconfig. Fortunately, those aren't things you'll have to worry about right now for the Network Plus exam. But that's one of the things about Linux. It's constantly changing. There's constant updates. There's differences between distributions. You should be just accepting of that and familiar with what those differences are. It'll make you a better Linux administrator as well. Let's see if we got another question here and available. I believe we do. The next question on our list, another long question. I like these long questions. Sets up a scenario, which, by the way, is very familiar with what you're going to see on the exam. The question is, A company maintains a headquarters building on the north side of the city and a manufacturing facility on the west side of the city. The two locations are connected with a 100 megabit per second Ethernet link. Which of the following would best describe this connection? Would it be A, WAN, B, MAN, C, PAN, D, WLAN, or E, LAN? There's a lot of ands there. And. So we've got WAN, MAN, PAN, WLAN, and LAN. Which of those best describe that connection? That connection, again, is that a company is maintaining a headquarters building on the north side and a manufacturing facility on the west side. Two locations connected with a 100 megabit per second Ethernet link. What type of connection is that? What is it? What is it? What is it? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA, and you can, of course, answer that question. Maybe it's one you're familiar with. Maybe you know this. Maybe you've put one of these in before. Maybe this is something that is a problem for you. Maybe you know this one cold. In fact, I'm gonna take a sneak peek and see how we did with this one. This one is really, there are some very specific things in here that you do need to know. There's specific things in the question that are very telling. And these are you need to become very familiar with whenever you're working with them. And if you're somebody who's been in networking for a while, and the Network Plus exam expects that you have been, this one probably is one you're familiar with already. Let's see how we did. A number of you are still answering this one, so I'm going to stall just a little bit longer and let you answer this one. It's nice to have a 100 megabit per second link between two sites, though, isn't it? If you're someone who is trying to get communication between two locations, that comes in pretty darn handy. Let's see how we did with this one. Well, we're not as sure about this one as we were some of the others. 58% of you said B, MAN, but 24% of you say that it is A, WAN. And then we've got kind of a tie for third between D, WLAN, and E, LAN at 9 and 8% respectively. And then only 1% of you said PAN, which is a thing. It's not a pan. It's not like a frying pan. It's spelled the same, but different when it comes to networking anyway. Let's see what this one happens to be. If you've got these two sites, they're in the same city, connected with each other. Since in this particular case, the headquarters building was on the north side of the city and the manufacturing facility is on the west side of the city, it's all in the same city. It is a metropolitan area network, or a MAN. So this is a case where if it's in really the same geographic area, it's in your same city, your same metropolitan area. And I recognize in many metropolitan areas, you've got, for instance, let's take Atlanta. There, of course, is Atlanta as a city, but there's many other cities that are all around Atlanta, but it's the same metropolitan area. That's what that's about. So if you have two connections between sites that are connected to each other and they're in the same city, it's a metropolitan area network. Most of the time you'll notice that it's metropolitan area network because there's going to be higher speeds than you might normally see over something like a wide area network connection. Generally in the same metropolitan area, all of the control of a particular infrastructure is very often through a single entity. So you've got a single network provider that is providing this. So in a single area, there might be AT&T. And AT&T doesn't have to hand this signal off to anyone else. So they can usually connect up a bunch of fiber in that metropolitan city. They can run 100 megabit, gigabit connections, and they get a nice profit margin off of that as well. You also commonly see this with governments because governments already have right-of-way. So a lot of governments will simply put conduit in the ground, run some fiber in that conduit, and between different sides of the city, they don't have to pay for wide area networks. If you've got a good government, that's how they're using that, taking advantage of those things. So those of you that did answer B, metropolitan area network, or MAN, the 59% of you got that one absolutely right. The 24% of you that said WAN, you were heading the right direction, a wide area network. But generally, wide area network means that we're communicating over longer distances than simple metropolitan areas. So if we're going across to another county, if we're going to another large city, if we're going from Atlanta to Macon, see, that's a wide area network. That is not in the same metropolitan area. If you're going from Columbus, Georgia to the coast, let's say you're going off, maybe you don't want to go to the coast right now in Georgia, but if you're trying to get across the state, you're now in the wide area network. And of course, if you're going across to different states, to different countries, to the other side of the world, that's certainly going to be a wide area network. 8% of you said WLAN, which is in many ways wireless local area network. That could also generally be associated with a service provider's wireless network, a cellular type network. You've also got local area network, which would be in a building or a campus. That would not be the right answer either. And only 1% of you said your personal area network or a PAN. So that's one of those scenarios where you just don't know what the options are going to be for any of those. So if you did answer B, man, for those of you that were trying to get that metropolitan area network, that's exactly what it is. So you're in good shape with that as well. Hopefully that's something you've run into whenever you're trying to work through these architectural problems. And if you've ever had to put up a link between sites in the same city, you've probably run into this yourself with those things. There is a lot that you need to know on this exam. Plenty of topics associated with this. And that's why I've taken all of the information from every single one of my videos and I put it all into one single set of notes. Of course, I recommend that you take all of the notes yourself. You're writing down all the information you can from all of these different courses. All of my videos for Network Plus are available, and the Network Plus course notes take all of that information and also consolidate it. So if you can't watch every video, you don't have time, or you would simply prefer having one place to go with all of the text, all of the graphics, all of the charts, all of those pieces of information that can help you recognize different ports and other things. This is one that does come in handy. I think it can help a lot of people. I've got a copy of the notes on my screen. Let's see. Let's just see what these look like. This is a PDF that you can download right now. You can purchase this and have it available. The version for Network Plus, over 65 pages. I think it's 66 pages long. And it's everything from every single video. There's all the port numbers. There's information about the OSI model. Here's all the information about broadcasts, about MAC addresses, broadcast domains. And I'm just into page number 6. You've got a bunch more pages in here to look at, plenty to go through. And I think this is one where if you need that cliff notes, that summary of information before you're ready to walk into the exam, where you can simply run through every single video, every single topic, nothing is missed in these course notes, this is what you may be looking for. You can find out more about these course notes at professormesser.com/NPCN or NPCN7. Also, there is an option there. You can get a physical version of the course notes that are not digital. Some of you like a book. It's exactly the same information. There's no difference between those. Kind of hard to see with the bright lights in here. But it's the same book with the same pieces of information, the same text, it's just a printed version. And if you do purchase the printed version, you can download the digital version immediately for free. I just throw that in for free for something. This is also a great way to support the website. I don't accept donations on my site. I'd rather you get something for your money. And hopefully this is something that not only will help you when you're ready to take your exam, but it's something that you can also use to help me and keep this site running as well. You can find out all about this at professormesser.com/NPCN7. And for those of you that already have the course notes, thank you so much. It really does go a long way for keeping the lights on here. Let's get another question. I've got more here available for you. So let's step through this question. This question dealing with Ethernet. And the question asks, which of these would be the best way to extend an Ethernet subnet onto a wireless network? Which of these would be the best way to extend an Ethernet subnet onto a wireless network? Would it be A, media converter? Would it be B, router? Would it be C, switch? Would it be D, WAP? Would it be E, modem? Which of those would be the best way to extend an Ethernet subnet onto a wireless network? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. You can answer that straight away. Some of you may know this one. I'm going to take a sneak peek as you're answering this one, having it go through. This is also one of those questions that if you've designed a network before, it probably has a wired component. It probably has a wireless component. Probably has a lot of good information there that you could choose from. And if you're one who has worked through this is probably going to be a gimme for you. Hopefully that's one that you can help as well. I think that's whenever I start stepping through those to figure out, what do I do? Where's this come from? How do I find this information? Having that knowledge, that experience of doing this before can really help you. And the exam objectives even say, we really expect before you take a Network Plus exam that you've done some of these things before. So hopefully some of these are a gimme. Hopefully some of these will help you with some of the things you're doing. Which of those would be the best way to extend a Ethernet subnet onto a wireless network? Very specific terms also on these questions. The questions themselves are not questions that are simply choosing any words to put together. There's a very specific meaning to each one of these. So make sure you read through those questions very carefully on your exam. Make sure you read through them very carefully here today, because I am putting them into a particular specific order as well. So make sure you're familiar with that. Let's see how we did with this question. Let's click the How Do We Do button here right at the top. And you can see, again, we're sort of mixed on this one. Which would be the best way to extend an Ethernet subnet onto a wireless network? 54% of you said DWAP. We've got 25% of you that said router. 11% of you said a switch. 5% of you said a modem. And then 4% of you said a media converter. I initially thought media converter because I'm converting between different media. But only 4% of you said media converter. Well, that's because in this particular case, this question asked some very specific things. It asked to extend an Ethernet subnet. It asked to extend it onto a wireless network. And then it also asked for the best way. And whenever you start looking at a question like that, you need to think, what is the most common way to convert from a wired Ethernet network onto a wireless network? And it would be a wireless access point, a WAP. The wireless access point really is the most common way. It's what everybody uses to take an initial connection on Ethernet, a wired connection, and get it out to the wireless part of the world. This is a way that you can extend effectively a subnet. A WAP, we think very often these wireless devices are routers because that's what we put in our houses. We buy these wireless routers that are connecting to a service provider. They are performing network address translation. They're a firewall. They're a content filter. They've got a switch on the back of it. But for our corporate environments, we don't put routers to connect and provide wireless access. We simply put a wireless access point into the ceiling, which takes the existing Ethernet subnet and simply makes it wireless. And that's why this becomes mentioned very often as a bridge. This is an OSI layer 2 device. It makes decisions on where traffic goes based on the MAC addresses of traffic that are going through it. So if there are other wireless devices, it doesn't go back to the wired network to be able to switch between those. It simply bridges within the same access point. And it doesn't change IP address schemes from the wired network to the wireless. Again, that would be a router. That would be a higher layer OSI layer 3 device. This is an OSI layer 2 device. We're simply extending an existing network that exists already. We're keeping the same IP subnet. We're keeping the same subnet masking, the same default gateways. We're simply making all of these devices on this network wireless as well, that normally would work fine on the wired network. And that would be a wireless access point. And that's why if we look at the people answering this, well, if you answered wireless access point, 57% of you did answer D. I try to get half of you answering the right question. I try to get half of you answering the wrong answers with these. So that's what I try to make happen with these, is having at least half of you learning something new. We came close here. It would not be a router. A router would be changing the IP subnet, be changing what network you are actually on. And in our particular question, we were trying to extend an Ethernet subnet, not convert or change between different Ethernet subnets. So it would not be a router. That would not be the right answer. It would not be B. 11% of you said a switch. A switch, this is in many ways a wireless access point, is a layer 2 device, and we can think of it as doing bridging or switching. We commonly use those terms interchangeably, but we often refer to a switch as a physical device. We're talking about a wired connection when we talk about a switch. Well, if somebody says, hand me a switch, they're not talking about hand me a device that's going to give me wireless access. They're talking about hand me a device that has wired Ethernet ports on the front of it. So that's why it would not be a switch. 4% of you said modem, modulator, demodulator, not a modem either, and a media converter in this case. Media converters very often are doing this with wired connections. So you may be going from copper to fiber, maybe going from coax to copper, coax to twisted pair. So that is a media converter. We don't commonly use media converters to convert between a wired network and a wireless network. There's more going on between wired and wireless that you have to perform some type of translation between those, and that's why we need a bridge or a wireless access point to be able to do that. So if you answered D, WAP, the wireless access point, 57% of you got that one absolutely right. We've got more questions here and available. Let's do another one. I've got one here. Let's click our next button and see what we have. I think I'll probably put this on the screen, a big one. There we go. A system administrator is configuring VNC on a file server. Which of the following would best describe this configuration? Would it be A, scheduled backups? Would it be B, remote access? Would it be C, file system encryption? Would it be D, site-to-site VPN? Or would it be E, static routing? System administrators configuring VNC on a file server. Which of the following would best describe this configuration? A, scheduled backups, B, remote access, C, file system encryption, D, site-to-site VPN, and E, static routing. You think you know the answer? You know the place, professormesser.com/QA. You can answer the question right away. Please do not answer in the chat room. Please do not put any comments in the chat room. That would be hints. We don't want that. We're all trying to figure it out. Make all of this happen. And if you're a system administrator who's configured VNC before, you probably know this one straight away. Probably very familiar with this one straight away. This is also, by the way, specifically mentioned in the N10007 exam objectives. So make sure that you know what this happens to be. If you're not familiar with it, if you're thinking, I don't know what you're talking about with the VNC, I'm going to guess, which you should be doing. But if you don't know, that's one that you could really think about to have there whenever you're working through there. Whenever I start working through these questions, I try to break them down into smaller pieces too. Maybe I know, based on these answers, I know what some of these things are, and I've never heard that term with it, so I'm not going to put those together quite yet. So you may be able to piece some of this out that way as well. It becomes a little bit more of a challenge to make those things happen. Let's see how we did with the VNC. How do we do? Let's click that button. 60% of us, 59% said B, remote access. 24% of us said D, site-to-site VPN. 14% of us said C, file system encryption. Only 4% said E, static routing, and exactly 0 of us said A, scheduled backups. Why was it not A, scheduled backups? That becomes pretty handy. Do people still use VNC? Absolutely. And if you're running Linux or Mac OS, it's just part of your operating system anyway. Why wouldn't you use VNC? It already works that way. So that's one that becomes super handy to know. Now, VNC itself, as I mentioned, absolutely listed in the exam objectives, absolutely a topic you should know about, and it deals specifically with remote access. If you need a VNC, being able to access these things and sharing that desktop from a remote location, that's what you would do. Now, if you're on Windows, you're probably using Microsoft's Remote Desktop Protocol, RDP. Remote Desktop is the way that I think most Windows users will configure, although if you're running an edition of Windows that doesn't allow an always-on version of Remote Desktop, you might want to install a VNC server on that device so that you can access it at any time from anywhere. Some folks asking, why do you need VNC on a file server? I imagine SSH would be better for most things, but you could install this on any device so you can get to the desktop of that device and perform remote desktop on there. So, it really could have been anything. Using a file server is not a red herring. It's simply an example of what many people can do to configure remote desktop on that device so that they can administer and access that device across the network. It may be that on your network, SSH is filtered. Now what do? You need still some way to access that device, especially if it's using an application on that server that is graphical. Not all services on Linux are 100% text-based or something that you could administer from the terminal. So that's something that you might want to think about. As I mentioned, Microsoft Remote Desktop is something available on many different operating systems, but usually the server side of that's going to be on Windows. But of course, there are clients for Remote Desktop for Linux, for Mac OS, and for other operating systems as well. You can run Remote Desktop from your tablet, as you can do for VNC, the virtual network computing. This is a different type of connection, different type of protocol. It uses different methods to be able to share that remote desktop, but functionally, it looks and feels just like remote desktop. You can see the screen, you can access it as if you are there. One advantage of VNC is it's very open source. A lot of open source options there. Some people have customized VNC. It's no longer open source for those flavors, but there's a lot of VNC flavors that are still open source and well supported, and you can configure those servers and those clients on different operating systems as well. If you're someone doing tech support, you're at the help desk, you need access to those devices, you're not familiar with the command line, it's easier for you to be able to use this from a console, from a desktop. This is a great way to do that. So makes sense. RDP is not only available for enterprise Windows, editions of Windows. RDP is also available for other versions. In fact, there are less capable versions of remote desktop available, even for the Windows Home versions. So you still get a lot of that available for those pieces. That may be one that you come into, and VNC is specifically mentioned in the CompTIA exam objectives. So make sure you're familiar with RDP. Make sure you're familiar with VNC. Maybe install them on one of your machines. Try it out. See if you can get VNC working. Maybe that would be a good one to use. I've got more questions here. Let's do another one. I've got one here. Let's see how we're doing on time. We're doing good. We got plenty of time for another question. Here is the question we have, which asks, a security administrator has found a system that is performing switch spoofing. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this system? Would it be A, it allows the system to hop between VLANs? Would it be B, it monitors all network traffic? Would it be C, it performs a man-in-the-middle attack? Would it be D, it allows access to a server without authentication? Or would it be E, it performs a DOS against specified MAC addresses? The security administrators found a system that is performing switch spoofing. Which of those would be the most likely reason for that system? Would it be A, allows the system to hop between VLANs, B, monitors all network traffic, C, performs a man-in-the-middle attack, D, allows access to a server without authentication, or E, performs a DOS against specified MAC addresses? All of those sound bad. All of those do not sound like things I like. So it must not be a good thing that this security administrator has found the system that is performing switch spoofing. So we now need to fix whatever problem this is. But what is it that they are doing? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. You can answer that straight away. Please, no hints in the chat room. Whenever I start looking at all of these different things it could be, this is one where we really do need to know, but under the surface, under the hood, what is going on? And that's something I've always enjoyed about networking. It's one of the reasons I think I first found networking so comfortable to work with and work in, is that you really can look at the traffic going across the network and see exactly what's going on. In a way, you're reading, if you do packet gathering and looking through the packets, it gets to be a point like someone looking through a heart monitor. You know, you can see the heartbeat. You can see what's going on the network. You can point to part of it and go, oh, I think we got a bad valve right there on the network. It's like the Matrix. You're seeing this stuff come through the screen. It looks like gobbledygook. It looks like craziness nonsense to you, but there is information in there you can pull out. And after a while, you get to where you can really read it quite nicely and find this information. Similar thing on the networking side. when you're finding these different technologies, like someone performing switch spoofing, you almost know immediately what's going on. So how do we do on this one? I'm not sure we did very well on this one because we're just not sure. We didn't get a majority on this one, but we did have almost a three-way tie. The answers we got on this one is C, performs a man-in-the-middle attack. 31% of you chose that. 26% of you, right behind it, said D, it allows access to a server without authentication. We've got practically the next two are tied, with 20% saying allows the system to hop between VLANs and 16% saying it performs a DOS against specified MAC addresses. And then 7% of you said B, monitors all network traffic. So switch spoofing. Switch spoofing can be a bit of a challenge. One of the things that many switches will do by default is when you plug a device into the switch will automatically try to determine what kind of device is on the other side. Ideally, this is supposed to help us as a network administrator. If we plug in a workstation, it automatically knows that's a workstation. It knows to use that as an access port. If we plug in a switch, it automatically knows to use that as a trunked connection between those two switches. But having that automation can sometimes be a little bit of a challenge from a security perspective because that process has no type of authentication associated with it. If we could make our workstation pretend to be a switch and connect to one of these automatically configured switches, we could effectively now set up a trunk between our workstation and this switch. And now we would be able to send trunked information into that switch and allow us to send and receive effectively from any configured VLAN on the network, or certainly on that switch. This is not something you want to allow on any network. We often will separate VLANs out for security purposes. That's a major reason for having VLANs. So this is one where we should not just allow anyone to hop or be on any particular VLAN at any time. But if somebody sets up their switch, sets up their workstation to spoof as a switch, to pretend to be a switch, that could be a significant security issue, and it would allow the system to hop between VLANs. 20% of you that chose A got that one absolutely right. Now, why wouldn't it be C, performs a man-in-the-middle attack? Well, in this particular case, this switch spoofing that's occurring is not one where we're sitting between two different devices. We're an in station. So we're simply connecting to the switch so that we can then gain access to VLANs that we would normally not have access to. We're not sitting between a conversation of two other devices, so we would not be a man in the middle. 25% of you chose D, allows access to a server without authentication. Simply because you're a switch doesn't give you any additional access into a server. You still require authentication, even if you're coming from a workstation or a switch or any other device on the network. 16% of you said performs a denial of service against specified MAC addresses. Switch spoofing doesn't really do any type of denial of service inherently. I suppose if you did gain access to a VLAN you were not supposed to gain access to, that you then could do anything you'd like, including perform a denial of service. But now you're adding more into the question than was being asked. This was really, we just found the device, it's doing switch spoofing. Why were they doing that? The primary version was indeed A, allowing the system to hop between VLANs. This would also not be a case where we'd be monitoring all network traffic. Any device can do that, by the way, and simply connecting a system up doesn't give you access to see all of the traffic, because on switch networks, the only thing that's being sent to you is broadcast traffic and traffic that is specifically designated to come to your workstation. So simply enabling the ability to capture all traffic doesn't mean you're going to see all the traffic. You would then have to tell your switch to set up a port mirror or some type of traffic redirection, or put a physical tap somewhere else in the network to be able to do that. There is software out there in the world that allows a device to spoof being a switch. That is the case here that we have with this problem where someone is doing switch spoofing. So that's the scenario that you want to make sure you can avoid. And of course, if you're a switch administrator, you're already configuring your switch not to automatically configure anything. You tell the switch exactly what type of interfaces are plugging in. This is something that is kind of a 101 from a security perspective. You never want to be surprised at what your switch might be doing. You would absolutely connect in and find the best way to make that type of thing happen. If you're someone, oh, and by the way, if this is the right answer, if you did choose A, allows the system to hop between VLANs, that is the correct answer. Got a number of you that answered that one as well. This question about switch spoofing and all these other things that we looked at come directly from the exam objectives. Make sure that you go to the exam objectives and understand exactly what's expected of you. The exam objectives, by the way, are more than just a summary of what might be asked on the exam. They're a comprehensive list of what could be asked of you. These are pages and pages and pages long. So make sure that you're very familiar with this list. This will be something that is the first thing you should grab, is the second thing you should grab, and the third. Before you do anything, you should have this list of exam objectives. It's going to help you a lot with getting that information. And if you're ever in a scenario where you're trying to figure out, do I need to know that for the exam? It's in the exam objectives. Go to the exam objectives. It will tell you everything you need to know to be able to make that happen. So pretty familiar. You will become very familiar with the topics on the exam objectives. Make sure you do. Should be the first thing you download, should be the last thing you look at before you walk into that exam. We do one of these Network Plus study groups every month. So September, we've spent an hour doing Q&A. We'll certainly do some more next month. We have one already scheduled for October the 10th. Now, if you're watching this on a replay and you're thinking, well, this is well past October the 10th of 2018, you can always go to the calendar that's on the Professor Messer website. There's a calendar link right at the top of the screen, or you can go directly to professormesser.com/calendar. And you can, of course, find out when the next event is. Although the next Network Plus is in a month, we have a Security Plus study group next week, so you may want to come back for that. We do the same Q&A. I'll open up the phone lines at the end. There'll be plenty of things that we can go through. But the formal Q&A part we're done with today. But stick around. I'll open up the phone lines. You can call in and ask anything you'd like for the next, I don't know, until we're tired of each other. Usually it lasts just under an hour. But of course, you can always, in the meantime, follow us on Twitter, professormesser.com/Twitter. All of our YouTube videos available at professormesser.com/YouTube. Don't forget about the course notes available at professormesser.com/NPCN, Network Plus course notes. And of course, I just mentioned the calendar. You can always go out there and find out what's going on. Thanks for being here on this Q&A and sitting through all those questions and figuring out all those details. We couldn't do it without you. Stick around for the next hour. We'll have the after show. I'll open up the phone lines. You can ask almost any question you'd like, and we'll answer it for you right here from the chat, from the phone lines, or any other way you can think of communicating. If you have a carrier pigeon that shows up, I'll answer the question from that as well. Thanks for joining us this time, though. We'll see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. I've got to get these phone lines open. That first hour just kind of flew by there. Let's get these phone lines going, and then I'll be able to get questions from you. Let's see. I click something on my side, and then something else happens. Let's see if I can do any of that. So let's go to my shows. Let's click on host a show. That's what I'm doing. I think that's relatively straightforward. And then we'll get the phone lines up and running. I have to call in just like you have to call in because my call in here is in the cloud. So let's call in myself to this connection and have it go beep, beep, beep. There it is.
Thank you for calling.
Well, you're welcome. You're so welcome. And then I have to type something here, which is this on my screen. And then I push pound sign, and it says,
enter your 6-digit PIN number.
Redundancy. We're going to type in this, and I'm typing in my 6-digit PIN number, which is a personal identification number.
Host. You are now in the host room.
See, I'm in the host room. See how easy that was? So if you would like to call in, I've got a phone number for you. If I push the right thing on my side, there it is, 855-785-7545. That number again, 855-785-RJ45. If you are in the continental United States, you can call in that way. If you are calling in on Skype anywhere in the world, it's a free call. You just put a +1 at the beginning. +1 855-785-RJ45, and I will pick up the phone cost for that. I pay, it's only per minute. It's pennies a day, as they say. I'm more than happy to do it. You're welcome to call in anywhere in the world, and we've already got people calling in. So we could probably jump to that. You can, of course, also, by the way, ask questions in the chat room by going to professormesser.com/live, and we can do that as well. Let's start with the 952 area code. Hi, caller. Are you there? What's your name? Where are you calling from? Caller. Oh, I got it. There you go. Hi, caller.
Well, let's start with the 952.
I hear myself. Hello, caller. Are you there? What's your name? Where are you calling from? You may want to turn me down a little bit.
Eli, I got a big speaker, man.
You might want to turn that down just a bit, Eli. There we go. Are you still there?
Yeah, I can hear you. It's just an echo on this side.
Well, we're definitely getting the echo on our side. What question do you have, Eli?
What would you say is the best way to, like, I've been practicing the Network Plus for about 3 months,
Okay.
and I'm just kind of lost. I feel like it's jumping everywhere. Like, I follow your videos, I watch other videos and study information online, but the networking is kicking my butt.
It is. It's a lot, and it is such a comprehensive exam. I think a number of people don't realize when they're jumping into it just how comprehensive it is. I think if you start with the A+, you're almost not ready for it, because the A+, it's things we were familiar with. We know what a computer looks like. We use one of those all the time. We know what an operating system is. We use Windows all the time. So it's something we're very familiar with. Networking in many ways is very esoteric. It's very different in how it operates, because we can't see the packets. We can't see them operating. We can't touch them like we used to do. So that's why I think a lot of people jumping into this now have to change the mindset. We're dealing with OSI models. We're dealing with categories of cable that we didn't even know existed. We're having to figure out these terms and probably more acronyms than you ever have to worry about with any other exam. You want to do acronyms? We got them in networking. It's the best place to go. So I would recommend, don't get overwhelmed with this. It's perfectly normal. 3 months is you're just getting into it at this point. You're really just getting started. So use your exam objectives. I find they make a great checklist. So it may be that you start at the top of the exam objectives. You really get those topics down good. You've read really cold. You've read the book. You watched the videos. You've done as much hands-on as you can that can help solidify some of those things. I think with the Network Plus, hands-on is a pretty important component. And then you can move to the next thing and just take little small bites of it at a time. Fortunately, the Network Plus exam doesn't have a lot of sections that overlap with each other. So you can start at the beginning and just take a little bite at a time and take little pieces out of it that way. That may be a good strategy to go.
Okay.
But 3 months, you're just getting into it. 3 months is probably an average for most people to really start grasping some of these things. So perfectly normal.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Professor.
Thanks for calling, Eli. It's a common challenge too, trying to figure out, how do I take this enormous amount of data? Because it's an enormous amount of information. These exams, people I see online, Network Plus is easy. I didn't even have to study. If somebody says that, they actually didn't take the exam. They've been in the industry so long it doesn't matter anymore. That's not the scenario for most of us. Let's see how things are going in the 202 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
My name is Paul.
Hi, Paul. What can we do for you today?
A couple of questions. I'm calling about the CompTIA stack certifications.
Oh, yes.
Do you think they really add value to the certifications, or just a gimmick to get somebody to take more tests?
Well, the thing about, for those not familiar, CompTIA over this last year has introduced what they call stackable certifications. Because we've always said, you've got, you take your A+, you take your Network Plus, you take the Security Plus. We've always talked about that as now you have 3 certifications. And one of the things that CompTIA is trying to do now, they've introduced these stackable certifications. So if you have, for instance, the A+ and the Network Plus, CompTIA calls this a CompTIA IT Operations Specialist. If you have Network Plus and Server Plus, you're a CompTIA Network Infrastructure Professional. Well, the reality of this, of course, is that it's a interesting way for us to keep track of what we're doing, and we're kind of stacking these things together, and it certainly looks great on a resume, don't get me wrong. But as you mentioned, it really doesn't help you unless the employers are the ones looking for these stackable certifications. I've not seen really any evidence yet that the employers have caught on to these stackable certifications. However, they've really only been out a number of months at this point. And usually the idea of employers grasping on to this new idea of doing things usually takes a number of years before these things become more commonplace. So I probably would not see employers start picking up on this for quite some time. Although within the ranks of us who are certified, it's nice to be able to talk back and forth on, here's the things we've done, and I'm stacking these things together. And at least it has a little more value to it when we're looking at it, because we're effectively getting an extra name, an extra title out of the work that we've already done, which isn't a bad thing, really. Microsoft does a similar thing. Cisco does a similar thing. It makes sense that CompTIA would do a similar thing as well.
Okay, well, thanks for asking my question. Have a good day.
Thanks, Paul. Don't be dismayed at the folks that are trying to use these things. And in fact, don't be dismayed if employers are looking at you like, I've never heard of CompTIA Network Infrastructure Professional. It's an opportunity for you to explain what it is, the fact that you've gone through Network Plus and Server Plus, and you've got both of those certifications, and now you're what CompTIA considers to be an infrastructure professional. And if you say, well, those folks who are doing Microsoft certifications, they're doing the same thing. You can even say, oh, it's similar to what Microsoft is doing, where you can take multiple tests, put them together, and now you have a certain certification name. So you can take advantage of that. Why not promote that as well? Let's go back to the phone lines. We got the 443 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Caller.
Hello.
Hello. Hi. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
My name is Deirdre. I'm calling from Baltimore.
Welcome. What can we do for you, Deirdre?
I'm taking a Network Plus course that is 4 weeks long.
Okay.
And we are expected to sit for the test. So I am really, really having trouble. I'm actually sitting here, and I'm supposed to be studying subnetting basics. And
Sure.
I don't know if this is going to take you away from what you're doing here, but I'm really struggling with the slash method.
And for the perspective of what we're
tips?
doing, there is no specific set of things we're doing. It's an open phone line. You can ask anything you'd like of any time. The 4 weeks of a course, and then you're expected to take the exam, I can kind of tell from what you're saying, that is a very aggressive time frame, especially when you consider that most people are usually studying for about 3 months before they're planning to take their exam. And that's just an average. Many people on my site are spending 6 months or longer. It usually takes me a long time to study for a certification exam. So doing it, and I've heard people go to a 1 week session, and I think there's no way you're going to be able to grab everything you need in 1 week to be able to do that. 4 weeks is a little more reasonable, if you're doing this all day, every day. But I think if that was me, it would probably at some point start wearing on my soul. I would not be able after the second week.
Oh, yeah.
I would wonder what I've gotten myself into, because that's a lot of content in a very short period of time. And the thing that you're mentioning, subnetting, of all of the topics on the exam, IP subnetting is probably the thing that most people have trouble with. You get wrapped around the axle.
Okay.
It's a topic nobody's ever heard of before if you've never done this in networking. It's a topic that involves math. Already, I have a problem with this. It's a topic that doesn't seem to have a lot of logic associated with it. You almost have to build in your head a whole design of a network and try to figure out the details. You have to do binary to decimal conversions. It's not a simple topic. It is a very complex topic. But it's one of these that once you get the concept and the idea of subnetting, it becomes a lot easier. Now, because people have asked this of me many times, and because you have mentioned your short time frame with this particular course, I will give you I'll give you two answers. I'll give you the one that your instructor is probably hoping to hear from, and I'll give you the answer that I think you should follow. There are so many different ways to do subnetting. The first thing you should do, the first thing anybody should do if they're getting into IP subnetting, is make sure you definitely understand how to do decimal to binary conversions and back again. That should become almost something you can do in your head. You should be able to look at binary and very quickly refer to a chart, or very quickly in your head figure out what those numbers happen to be, because you're going to be expected to do that very thing anytime you do any type of subnetting manually. And when I say that, subnetting has so many different ways that people do it. There's the powers of 2 method. There's the magic number method. I have the 7-second subnetting method. And all of those are completely different ways to do it, along with the manual calculation of doing it. There's 4 different ways to do this. All of them give you exactly the same answer, but just do it in different ways. So that also complicates things for people that are trying to learn this technology. The answer I usually give is find one of those methods that works for you, stick with it, and keep doing it over and over and over again. And you will find at some point, and you've probably heard this, at some point a switch will flip in your head, and suddenly you'll go, oh, I see what this is trying to do. Why am I trying to make it so much harder than it actually is? Because all you really do is taking a pie and cutting the pie into small pieces depending on how many people are in the room. That's all you're doing with subnetting. But the problem is all the math and everything around it. Here's the answer I give that instructors don't like. Stop doing subnetting. As far as the Network Plus is concerned, don't do any subnetting. If you look at the exam objectives, subnetting is in one section of one domain, and in that section are many different things you should know. And the rest of the Network Plus exam has no subnetting on it whatsoever. And people have reported after they've taken the Network Plus exam, I didn't get any subnetting questions. I spent a week learning subnetting. I didn't get any questions. That's because the Network Plus exam is not very heavy on subnetting. So I find a lot of people spending way too much time studying for something that is very underrepresented on the exam. Now, if you get it, if you're really into this and you really want to learn subnetting and it's something that's bothering you, I get that too. And spend the time and learn it. But just know that after going through all of that, you might get one question about subnetting on your exam. You might get 2 questions about subnetting on your exam. You might get 0 questions about subnetting on your exam. And what I tell people is instead of spending all that time trying to learn the subnetting piece, you could be spending that time trying to learn something else on the Network Plus exam objectives, and probably many more things on the Network Plus exam objectives, especially if you have a limited amount of time available to study, which it sounds like you do. So those are my 2 study tips for subnetting. One of them is to dive right in, find a method, spend a day doing it. And at the end of a day, if it's not clicking for you, light it on fire, push it out to the curb, and start working on other things.
I love it. Thank you very much.
I hope that helps. Or maybe I'll get a angry call from your instructor. Either way, I'm fine with it. And there she goes. Thanks, Deidre. That's, you never know. The exam is one of those things. You never know what you're going to get. Thanks for holding, caller. It's the 716 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Caller. Are you there? Hi, caller. Are you muted, caller? 716 area code. Are you there? Is the phone working?
Oh, yes, I'm here. Sorry
Hey,
about
there
that.
you are. Hey, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, I'm calling from Buffalo, New York. And first of all, I want to call and thank you. I just took the 006 exam last month.
Oh.
I passed it.
Oh, right at the
So,
end.
I used your course notes. Yeah.
Great.
And everything worked out for me. So I was nervous taking the exam. I did find out the exam was a little bit tougher than I thought it would be. They didn't really have any give me questions. Everything was kind of layered.
Right.
And I'm sorry.
No, you're right. I agree. The 006 exam does not have any gimme questions on it.
So, and then just even doing it, I felt like, like I see the answers and then I go back and I'm like, wait, maybe they're asking the wrong question. And then I had to really carefully kind of see what they were looking for. But anyways, I passed it. It was a huge load off my chest. I started, doing it, I think in February, and then really cracking down once I found out they were getting rid of the exam.
Right.
And I used your notes. I bought them in your video, so
Thank
I appreciate everything. But My question is after I took it, I got the certification, I logged into CompTIA, and it's good for 3 years.
Right.
And I got the little green bar saying I passed it. So do I have to take it again in 3 years, or is it just continuing ed at this point?
Yeah, many people think that after 3 years, now they have to take it again. They just took it. Fortunately, and I will say this, the vast majority of people will never take the exam again because you don't have to take the exam again to renew your certification. That's probably the hardest thing you would do would be to take the exam again. There are many, many, many other ways to renew your certification exam. The CompTIA website has an entire section on continuing education. And this is a place where you can go to figure out what can I do to renew. There's some things that you can renew by collecting continuing education units. So by watching this, by taking a training course, by attending a trade show, you can earn hours that you can apply towards renewing this. One of the things that CompTIA has also done in the past is if you take a higher level exam, it automatically renews your lower level exams. So let's say in 3 years, you take your Security Plus and pass it, that will renew your Network Plus for another 3 years. So that's another way people are doing this. And one of the things that CompTIA is starting now is they have these methods to renew using a single method. They have something called CertMaster CE that allows you to renew by simply taking an online course. They call this the CertMaster CE single activity. And you can, for Network Plus, pay $189, spend 4 to 6 hours, and you're renewed for another 3 years. So for those of you that are getting down to the last day of your renewal before it is expired after 3 years, you're like me. You wait until the very last minute to put your taxes together. You've waited until the very last minute to renew your certifications. CompTIA has a way you can pay them $189. Take this exam online. It's not an exam, it's more of a CBT, a computer-based training with questions at the end. You answer all the questions correctly, and you're renewed again for another 3 years. That's pretty easy. And there's other methods in there too. You have to spend a lot of time on the CompTIA website looking at their continuing education. But now that you've got the certification, I get it. You don't want to lose it. But then again, you're not really interested in taking this exam again either, and I don't blame you. And most people don't expect you to. Employers recognize that once you're certified, you just have to keep that certification current. And that's one of the ways, many different ways that CompTIA gives you to be able to keep that certification current.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much. And I can't thank you enough for all the videos and all the help.
And congratulations on your Network Plus. Glad to hear it. Best of luck.
Great. Thank you. Bye now.
That's always good whenever you're trying to figure out. And I will tell you, the 006 exam, from what we are hearing with the 007 exam, I would say they spend a little more time on the questions. It's not quite as convoluted. It's basically the same content. I don't think it's necessarily easier, but I think the questions are more straightforward. They're really asking you questions now that are pulling the knowledge out of you rather than spending a lot of time trying to read a lot and go around and around trying to, I don't know what they were trying to do with that, actually. Back to the phone lines. Hello, caller. Where are you calling from? What's your name?
Hello, Professor. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Hi. Where are you calling from?
Hello, I'm calling from UK, Liverpool.
Oh, welcome. Glad to have you here. What can we do for you today?
Yeah, my name is Hassan. I passed my security last mid-July.
Nice.
And I'm looking forward to jump to MCSA server.
Sure.
But currently I'm studying MCSA Windows 10. But my question is, if I wanted to work on the server administrator side or network administrator side, would it be any advantage for having a Python knowledge or maybe a Python certification?
I would like to see people that have certifications that are layered across a lot of different parts of technology. And I think that having knowledge of operating systems and knowledge of networking sets you up very well. First, I think networking is a lot of the operating system side. You just don't necessarily touch the operating system in the same way, but you're trying to connect the operating systems to each other. So it helps to have knowledge of Windows, it helps to have knowledge of Linux, it helps to have knowledge of Mac OS, and of course, knowledge of mobile devices as well. These days, you're usually setting up some type of mobile device management, and all of these things have to network with each other. So there's your key. If you can get a good foundation of Microsoft, a good foundation of Linux, and then maybe even some Mac OS thrown in there, depending on what's going on in your particular geographical area, I think you're well positioned on the network side. And I mention this because of the way that people would normally go after that point is they want to go into IT security. And I think for IT security, as I've mentioned many times, you really need a very, very, very solid foundation in networking, not just switch and router management, but really an architectural perspective of networking. That architectural perspective of networking also has a large reliance on knowledge of operating systems. So that's why I think getting that foundation of operating systems, kind of like what you're doing, you've gone through the Security Plus, you're looking at networking, and you're getting some of these great Microsoft certifications. That's a really good balance. I think you've got the right idea. Also, ultimately, it will depend on what the people hiring in your geography are looking for. At one point in the UK, CompTIA certifications were all the rage, and there were a number of things that happened with the way things were going with the economy and the way things were going with how those certifications were rolled out that I think shifted things in the UK a bit. And so you have to look around in Liverpool and in the areas where you would like to work and figure out what are the employers looking for. And that may be just more research on your side to go online, see what people are asking for. And if everybody's asking for Microsoft, then you know exactly where you need to go to be able to make that happen.
Thank you very much. That's really useful. Thank you, Professor.
Thanks, Hassan. Best of luck. That's I think kind of it doesn't matter where you are in the world. Those are the things you need to look for, especially when you're trying to figure out where do I go from here. When I started out on operating systems, really started out on hardware, break fix, adding hard drives or upgrading memory, plugging in printers. That's where a lot of people start. I moved from there into operating systems. At that point, Windows became this thing, Windows 3.1. So I now started gathering Microsoft knowledge and ended up getting my MCSE in Windows NT 4.0. So that's sort of the foundation of operating systems and hardware was set. And then I layered on top of that a knowledge of networking. It just happened to be in an environment where I could do that. So then I had kind of this 1-2 punch. I knew a lot about Microsoft because I had the MCSE, and that was 6 exams of different kinds I had to go through. I had this knowledge of networking, which there weren't a lot of networking certifications at the time. There was the CNX. So I got a CNX in Ethernet, a CNX in Token Ring, a CNX in FIDI, a CNX in LAN cabling. So really understood the networking side of things at the packet level, understood operating systems at an operations level. Now I could combine those things together. I think it's a good mix. You've got so much available for you at that point. You can go anywhere in IT now because everything uses an operating system and everything touches the network. Okay, let's build on that. It makes sense. Let's go back to the phones. The 614 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, good afternoon, Professor. My name is Tandy, and I'm calling from Columbus, Ohio.
Oh, welcome. What can we do for you?
I use packet switcher all of the time to simulate networks.
Sure.
And one thing I've always been struggling with is to have computers on a VLAN to communicate with the router, to get on the internet. But I always struggle with that.
And this is something probably one of the most common questions people have when they're getting ready to take their ICND1 or their Cisco certifications, because it's a challenge trying to figure out where the traffic is going, how to route between the different VLANs, how to bridge between the VLANs, how to understand what a trunked VLAN is and what the native VLAN is on a particular trunk. These are all very foundational questions in connecting up networks together to each other. It is something used in every network you will run into. It is something that you're expected to know if you're planning to be a switch administrator. And it's something that, of course, on the exams you need to know. We barely touch on this with the Network Plus. Not a lot, but when you get into the Cisco, even the very first Cisco exam that you'll probably take, which is the CCENT, or what the term that Microsoft or that Cisco calls the ICND1, is you need to know a lot about trunking. You need to not only know what trunking is and what all those terms are, you have to understand how to configure it on a switch at the command line. And you mentioned using Packet Tracer, and that's a great way to do it. Packet Tracer is free. You don't have to be have a special membership. You don't have to pay for it. You do have to register on Cisco's website, and you get access to Packet Tracer. Packet Tracer, a little bit overkill for Network Plus, but if you're somebody who really wants to understand what's happening under the surface, Packet Tracer can be used with Network Plus to help understand how to do the routing, how to do the switching, how trunking works, and all those pieces. And there are a number of different websites that have labs for Packet Tracer on how to create a router on a stick, which is a very common way to take a single trunk connection into a router and route between all of the different VLANs that happen to be on a single physical wire. I would recommend finding some of those. There are so many out there and available. On Reddit, there's a fantastic Cisco subreddit. There is a fantastic Cisco Discord that I'm on, where people have tons of these labs available. And for VLANs, my recommendation is to start at the beginning with VLANs and just step through it. Step through every single piece of it to figure out, how do I understand what's happening under the surface? And if you can, Packet Tracer allows you to do this. Take a packet capture of that. Watch the packets going back and forth. Compare a trunked packet with one that is not trunked and see what the differences are between those. And you'll start putting together, oh, that's what the switch is doing whenever it receives a packet on a trunk link with a 802.1 tag. Now I've got the .q tag. What do I do with it? That's really the most important part, is visualizing it and understanding how the switch interprets and uses that data. And from that point on, immediately the switch will flip in your head. You go, okay, now I understand what's happening on that trunk port when it receives that data. Now I can start extending that capability out even further. It is a fundamental capability. There's a little bit of a learning curve, but I think if you spend some time going through a couple of labs, you'll find that you'll suddenly realize what it's doing.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for calling. I think that it's probably one of the top questions about the networking side. And I will tell you, as someone who has been in the industry, designing networks, designing security systems, putting in next generation firewalls, implementing these in live networks and some of the biggest networks in the world, we mess this stuff up all the time, by the way. We don't plug things in the right place all the time. We use the wrong subnet masks all the time. We're humans. We make mistakes. Now, most of the time we get it right. Don't get me wrong. It's not like we do this all the time and it's nothing but a jumbled mess. Most of the time we get it right, but we get it wrong sometimes because it is a very complex set of things we're working with. And when you're connecting trunk links together, when you're performing link aggregation across different devices, now we have to worry about, does that device support LACP? Should I configure this manually? How should we set up these links to each other? Is there redundancy that we need to worry about? What type of redundancy is in place? Those are things that become a little more complex when you start working through the pieces of them. So don't be concerned that as you're going through this and thinking, I'm never going to get this right. You are going to get it right, but you're also going to get it wrong sometimes. And that's okay. We do it all the time out in the world. You just are doing that in the lab, figuring out where you got it wrong and then deploying it into production so you're in good shape. Let's go to the 786 area code. Thanks for holding, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Professor. My name is Hassan. I'm calling from LA. I spoke to you when last week or 2 weeks ago when it was your Security Plus study group, but for some reason you couldn't hear my voice.
Yeah, I think that was my problem. You. Yes.
But anyway, so I am having a really hard time with the Security Plus because I think I mentioned to you last time that I work 4 days and then I have 3 days off, which I have just taken so I could study.
Right.
But the first thing is retention, because when I get back from work to my study, I find myself not remembering stuff that, I studied last week.
Right.
And is there a trick? Because I've been studying since February and my admission at WGU is based on this certification and I need to pass it ASAP. So if there is any trick that you can suggest or anything that you can help me with, I would really appreciate it.
So what methods are you using for studying now? You have a good book, there's videos you're watching, is there Q&A that you have, and is there hands-on that you're working with?
So I have the study guide from, I believe it's Clark.
Okay.
It's a really thick book, yeah.
Yep.
And then your videos,
Great.
and then the exam objectives.
Great.
So it's, it's the exam objectives, then your videos, and then I go to the book. But the book is very detailed, and I just get lost in the book, and then I have to go back to the objectives. And then it's all like a mess.
I think you have half of the study materials that I would recommend that you have. You got some good ones. You've got a good book. You've got some videos, and that's really half of what I recommend that anyone have if they want to have all the tools in their toolkit to be able to study for these certifications. The other two things I recommend you get is Q&A. And there's a lot of different places on the internet to get Q&A for Security Plus, and it's a little difficult to find good sources of questions and answers for the 501 exam because the 501 exam hasn't even been out for a year yet, and it takes a while to create these. But there are some good books and there are some good online resources for security-based Q&A. I've seen some good ones mentioned on the CompTIA subreddit, for example, on Reddit. That may be a good place to start doing some research and say, where can I get some good Security Plus Q&A? Because that helps solidify some of these topics in your brain. You've read it, you've watched the video, but did you really get it? And sometimes those questions can help solidify those topics as you're going through them. The other thing that I'd mention, this may be the thing that really makes the biggest difference, is hands-on. I know a lot of the topics on Security Plus don't lend themselves to a lot of hands-on. There's topics about change control. There's topics about the different attack types and how you would see those on a network. Those don't necessarily lend themselves to a lot of hands-on, but there's a lot of command lines on the 501 exam. It's nice to be able to perform those commands yourself at a command line to be able to use those tools. There are a lot of things you could do, like the exam objectives talk about IPsec tunnels. What if you built an IPsec tunnel between two devices and you sent traffic across that tunnel? I think doing those types of tasks go a little outside the scope of the Network Plus exam because the Security Plus exam, because Security Plus isn't going to ask you to build an IPsec tunnel. They're going to ask you questions about the IPsec tunnel, but I think if you've already done it, the questions become a lot easier. So this may be a case where you need to take the scope of this and instead of focusing completely on a very narrow scope of these topics, maybe build out the scope a little bit using some Q&A and build it out, use some hands-on. And I think you'll find the topics now suddenly become easier because you've seen it different ways, you've done it yourself, and I think it fires that synapse in your brain a lot easier.
Okay. And on the Discord channel for CompTIA Security Plus, somebody mentioned they just took the exam and they said that the questions had like logs. I had no idea what that was. I mean, the questions had logs in them, and then you have to like read up through the logs and then answer them because the book or your videos does not mention anything about logs.
Yeah, I have an entire video on logs. There is a section of the 501 exam objectives that talks about logs. There is also, I think my last study group, we did a question where I showed a log and we had to answer a question from a log. I think a lot of people are worried that these exams are going to, the log part of the exam is going to be something that's so insurmountably difficult to understand that they're never going to be able to recognize it. But in most cases, reading a log is pretty straightforward. Has a date, a time, an event name, an event number, and then maybe some extra text that tells you what that event happened to be. We're not talking about having to decipher DNA. We're not having to map a genome to be able to read these logs. It's very straightforward when you start reading through logs to see what's there. So I wouldn't worry so much about the topic, but it is part of the exam objectives. I have a video on the types of logs you may run into that are being asked of you from those exam objectives. But it's another one of those where don't get wrapped around the axle on it. You might get a question about logs, and that might be it. It's not a huge section of the exam.
Okay. And lastly, time management. Would you recommend a way of managing time?
That's a kind of a challenging question because everybody manages time differently. Everybody has different things going on in their lives that determine what time it is. I say stick to the fundamentals. The way I study is I only grab a section of the exam objectives at any particular time. So I grab one tiny piece, and the Security Plus exam objectives are very much like Network Plus and A Plus in this regard, is that the section you're studying now isn't necessarily applicable to other parts of the exam. So it makes it easy to break it up into smaller chunks. So I can take a tiny chunk, read everything I need to read about it, watch a video on the topic, take some Q&A associated with that topic, which is probably in your book, and then maybe do some hands-on if that particular topic applies to that, or just do some generic Google searches of these. You run into a situation with change control, and if you've never been part of a change control process, that's just sort of a blob of knowledge that you don't know how to apply. But there's plenty of people that have written blog entries, written papers, written messages on Reddit where they talk about their change control process and how they did that this week. Those are the nuggets of information that will help you humanize some of these topics that seem so inhuman. And you'll find plenty of that on the Security Plus. Not so much on Network Plus, but there's plenty of these very esoteric topics that you've never heard of before that are certainly part of networking. But if you're not part of it now, it just seems like a blob of content that I now have to somehow fit into my brain. But if you can see a story of somebody else using that, it might help also when you're ready to take that exam.
Okay, sweet. Well, hopefully next time I call you, it will be a good call, and I'll tell you that I passed the exam.
You're on the right track. I think you're going to do just fine. Best of luck.
Thank you so much.
You never know exactly what you're going to be faced with on that exam, and the benefit is you can take it. If you don't pass the exam, just take it again. I've had to take multiple exams multiple times to finally pass. That is a completely normal thing to run into. And in fact, the second time through, you're better prepared because you know what to expect when you sit for that exam. To the 661 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Caller. Hi, what's your name?
Hey, my name is Luis.
Hello, Luis. What can we do for you today?
Hey, I was just calling to just thank you, Professor, for all the material that you provide. I was able to get a job because of you.
All right.
It wasn't necessarily through certification. It was just through your material alone.
Oh, I thought you might have used my name. I said, well, the professor sent me here, so I need this job. Now, well, if he sent you, you must have been. Well, I did the easy part. You did the hard part. So congratulations on that. And it's always good to know that somebody's able to go get that job they were wanting.
Yeah, like any trade, or certification will not make or break you from getting a job.
Right.
You might just perform the task at a discounted price than with somebody else. But all I have to say to people is that, like you said, get some hands-on. Practice is really going to solidify a lot of the things. Even just watching videos of somebody else performing the task, will help you understand the processes that are involved.
That's a good point. Maybe you don't have to build the IPsec tunnel, but you're watching someone else build the IPsec tunnel. If they can really annotate that and give you an idea of what they're doing as they're doing that, that might be just as good.
Yeah. Another thing I have to let people know is that I did go through a lot of job interviews, but a lot of the job postings are not sincere. a lot of the HR, they could be told that there's a hiring freeze.
Right.
Yet they will still conduct interviews, just to stay busy and to have a pool of candidates that are available. And but you can use that to your advantage,
It's a double-sided, it's a two-sided sword, right? Because you've got time that you're spending on this, and time is valuable. Even if you don't have a job, time is especially valuable. But you're right. It gives you a chance to practice, to go through this. And quite honestly, the people interviewing you on these, once you get into the industry, you will be running into these people again. You might be interviewing with these people again in the future, a year, 2, 3 years later or more, and you'll be able to bring this up again. So anytime you have the chance to meet somebody in the industry is a great opportunity to first make a connection. And secondly, if at the end of the interview they say, I do have to tell you that we were told this morning we got a hiring freeze. We wanted to bring you in and talk to you, but it really doesn't like there's an opportunity here. That's not an opportunity for you to walk out the door. He knows someone else in the industry. He's already in the industry. You can ask them, well, who would you recommend I talk to? Is there somebody, another company that they're hiring right now for this type of skill? Is there a group of people you would recommend I call? Is there someone on LinkedIn?
Oh, exactly.
That's a great opportunity.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I did. I ended up interviewing the interviewers.
Great.
And then I said if I could see their network setup, if I could have a tour of their facility.
Nice.
Ask them to see if their layout, what software they were using, what were the long-term goals that the company was striving for.
This is great.
That helped me with the next interview,
This is perfect. When I had a job as a systems engineer, I would go from place to place, and we had a particular product that we were representing. But I'm a geek too. I want to know what they're doing in their company. And so we would go in a conference room, we talk for an hour, and I would say, well, can we get a quick tour of what you got here? I want to see your stuff. Show me the routers. I want to see the switches. I want to see your fiber infrastructure. And I got to go into the biggest networks in the world and really see what they were doing. And I was able to compare and contrast. It's a great learning opportunity, and you should absolutely take advantage of that. Good for you.
Yeah, and it also goes without saying that you should never submit personal information to just any job posting. Don't expect everything on the internet is legit. Don't give your social security over email, of course.
Oh my, no.
Yeah.
Yes, and especially job postings, anytime someone's in a vulnerable situation or somebody who's trying to get a particular thing done, you always see these scammers come out of the woodwork. Craigslist is not a good place to get job postings from. And in fact, once you kind of get into the industry, you find that there are a lot of recruiters out there. You need to find the recruiter that fits for you. Not all of the recruiters are good either. But there you will find as you talk around, and this may be a question for the people you're interviewing with who just told you there's a freeze. Do you have a recruiter you work with? And you should contact that recruiter, because that recruiter not only works with that company, that recruiter works with every other company in your area. So these are places where, again, the networking of people is just as important as the networking of all of these components.
Oh, yes. Another thing I could tell people is geographic location is important, like what employers are in your area. But if you don't mind moving, you just have to go to what is passionate to you. Everything nowadays is becoming more meshed into the digital network that are connecting to the internet. Like, let's say that you go working for Kawasaki, their network is not going to look the same as Hewlett Packard. But if you can build rapport, some commonality with the organization, like let's say that you're into racing, well, Kawasaki's for you. But let's say that you're into photography, then Hewlett Packard might be a better choice for you. And you're going to want to improve the company, because you're going to want to improve on your own, how can I say, hobbies.
It's true. That's true. And there's a number of people this also comes into play for people that have already started off in one industry and they're trying to get into IT. I see this often on my site. Is somebody is a truck driver and they want to do more in IT. They want to now become working with technology. Well, there's tons of transportation companies out there looking for good IT people, trucking companies, companies that are transporting over rail systems. You have the knowledge now of that. I've not a lot of people in medicine want to move into IT. IT systems that are in hospitals are huge and incredibly important. And who knows more about how important they are than people who are already familiar with what they used to do in healthcare? It's an often overlooked, but an incredibly important thing to consider.
Yes, Professor. And I just wanted to thank you again. And I just want to let everybody know that it's possible. Just don't overthink it. Just follow your hobbies, and people will know that you really are trying to improve your own hobbies.
Could not have said it better, sir. I thank you for the call. Best of luck.
Thank you, Professor.
I really can't add to that. There's nothing more I can put on the top of that than what has just been said. That's a great way to look at it. And with that, we're sort of at the end of the time we have for today as well. I want to thank everyone for joining me for the first hour. Thanks for sticking in for the after show. Thank you for your questions in the chat room. Thanks for all the calls we had today as well. It's another one where we really wouldn't have a show unless you were here creating the show for us and helping everybody else. Fantastic information and input from everyone who called. Thanks for joining us this month. We've got one of these next week that deals with Security Plus. We'd love to have you come back for that as well. Of course, we've got the other A Plus and Network Plus study group after that next month. Come on back for those too. Be glad to have you there. If you are waiting on the replay of this, the replays are immediately available after I'm done here. It's a few minutes to process, and they're available online. You can start back at the beginning and get another good 2 hours of content in if you missed anything from the beginning. Thanks for joining us today. We will see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group.